Cyberpunk was delayed again. I really wish I didn't have to make this video, but I do. I assume you've all read the statement. If you haven't, I'll put it up on screen and you can read it. I'm not going to recite it at all, but what I am going to do is explain why video game development is so difficult right now. Most video game delays should be thought of in a different lens now than video game delays a few months ago, simply because of the different circumstances. I will recognize and say that the first large delay on Cyberpunk was 100% a result of a failure of management and executives, and nothing will change that. But a lot of delays happening right now are due to reasons that might be out of control of the developers, and it really sucks and it's unfortunate that it's unfolding this way. Working from home adds so much time to development, it adds so many barriers, so many issues, it's just a complete nightmare sometimes. In a studio, you could walk over to somebody and talk to them about literally anything. You could talk to them about opinions on the game, you could talk to them about bugs you found, you could talk to them about issues with tools that you have. All of this is super easy to do when you could just walk over. But having to interface through a messaging system can really add a barrier, a hesitancy. You think you should solve it yourself because you don't know what that other person is doing right now. They might be in the middle of a super important meeting, whereas if you were in an office, you could literally just see that they're at their computer and you're like, hey, I have this issue, can you help me out? And it's like, sure, okay. But because of that barrier, everything goes much slower. Having group conversation, in a studio, you could just walk up to a couple of people and talk at them, and you'll most likely start a group conversation. And those could be super productive. And it's already hard to talk to one person. Imagine trying to talk to multiple different people through some messaging system. It's really difficult. And there are discussions and arguments in games. You know, it's tricky. It's a rule of the trade. And having those discussions and arguments is so much harder when you can't understand the nuances of conversation that you get when you're talking to somebody face to face. Sure, there are video calls, but when you have a large enough group, you're not going to see that person who's taking up 1/10 of your screen, and even still, you lose some of the smaller details of actual human motion and emotions that are presented through their body. File transferring is a complete nightmare. Studios have intranets and internets that are built to handle large file transfers. And when everyone is going and now working from home, you have to deal with good old Comcast down the street, and you can imagine how difficult that is. Also have issues with VPNs and oversaturated networks that slow everything down even more. And not only that, but data caps are a thing. You know, a couple weeks into each month, I run out of my unlimited package with Comcast, and as a result, I have to go on a VPN when I'm not working, or I won't be able to watch HD videos, or I won't be able to play games. I literally get less than 1 up and 1 down during these throttling times, and I can't do anything about it because I need to move those files for work. Referencing part of their delay message, I want to talk about what they said about going gold and their day 0 patch. So they said that they went gold, but honestly, going gold means something completely different than what it meant, 10, 15 years ago when the same term was used. Back then, and prior to that, when games were done, they were done. You put them on a disc, you sent them to people, and that was that. You really didn't have much more control over that. But nowadays, day 0 patches are expected. So when game development stops, when a game is done, more work is being done to improve on it, which is what's going on right now. And with any game that has DLC, which at this point is most games, or seasonal content, they release a season pass, that is content that is being made through the release of the game. So there is never really a halt in development of any new huge game at this time unless they decide that they don't want any DLC. And let's be real, are business executives going to say, yeah, we could just not make money off DLC? No, they're going to make DLC, let's be real. So going gold just means something completely different now, and honestly, it doesn't mean much in terms of game development these days. It is a cool thing, it is a cool announcement, it is a hype builder, but it doesn't mean too much. I think it's worth mentioning the difficulty that actually exists when building for multiple platforms. Not only multiple platforms, but they're releasing cross-generational, which is a burden that many AAA games have to deal with at this time. When we're moving from a huge player base on PS4s and Xbox 720s, whatever is out right now, onto PS5s and the Xbox fridge. I'm sorry, I actually can't remember the Xbox ones in the heat of the moment. And making content that supports all these different platforms is not as simple as changing a few sliders. You have to seriously have that knowledge in mind from when you start the development and make sure that you're building it every step of the way for multiple platforms. And that honestly is what you need to do. It doesn't make it easy. For example, QA will have to verify that every fixed bug is fixed on all 9 platforms, and there might be bugs that only exist on a few platforms and not others. Imagine the hell of debugging that. While some games like Fortnite or other stylized games might not have too much issues on the graphics side, think about games that are both trying to push the graphics to be next gen and a game that has to support old generations. It is a super complex issue that requires a bunch of optimization time. That's just not easy to do. John Lennon had tweeted earlier this year, and I quote, "No one wants to develop for an underpowered Jaguar CPU any longer. I've spoken with enough developers to know how painful the process is at this point. Leave the Xbox One and PS4 behind." And this was in August. This cross-generational thing is something that comes from a marketing standpoint, where you want to expand your audience as much as possible. But the actual cost that it takes to do that is creating a lot of the emotional and mental toll on these people because the development is frustrating and difficult. You have so many more complex problems to solve that you wouldn't have had to worry about if you were just working on focusing on current gen or only next gen or something like that. But there are just so many frustrating things that you have to deal with. Remember how I mentioned earlier in the video that it's harder to solve problems in a work from home scenario? Seriously, think about this scenario for a moment. If you're making a game with 9 release candidates, in a studio, even in a studio, that's a huge chore. Imagine a room with setups. You have 9 consoles. Maybe you have 9 screens, maybe they're all on one screen. You might have that a couple times, and you have people constantly using all those 9 consoles, switching between them in order to test for bugs, make sure things are working, make sure you're performant, make sure all of these things. How the hell do you transfer that system into work from home? I can't even think of the logistics that are involved in that. It is just mind-boggling. Do you split up the different release candidates? You send somebody home with a PS4 and a PS3, send somebody home with an Xbox One and an Xbox, whatever the release candidates are. It's like, or do you have all 9 go to one person and all, have multiple kits of 9? Like, what does that look like at a work from home setup? Is somebody going to have a stack of consoles 5 feet high? Like, you can imagine how difficult it is trying to debug this kind of stuff when you're not able to directly be next to somebody and talk to them instantly. It is just going to be a constant amount of difficult and frustrating and tedious work. And all right, I'm kind of going on a bit of a rant, but let's focus back on the message. The game was delayed for 21 days. Can that really mean anything? I mean, it's 3 weeks. So let's crunch the numbers a little bit. So I'm going to assume they're in peak crunch. I'm going to be assuming 16-hour days. There's probably people that are going to be working more than that, and that's really not pretty, but I'm going to be assuming the worst at this case. 336 hours per person in those 3 weeks, and according to Google, in 2019, the employee size of CD Projekt Red was over 1,100. I'll round it down to 1,000 just in case not all of that is developers, but we're just going to use that for math's sake. That is 336,000 man hours or 38 man years. So yes, I think a difference can be made. It's kind of interesting to think about how in 3 weeks it would take one person 38 years, assuming that that one person had the skills of every single person at that studio, which is, frankly impossible. But that's just putting some of the numbers into perspective. I do think 21 days can make a huge difference between a release candidate being buggy and bad and a release candidate being clean, just fixing up those last few things. Hopefully they are fixing up those last few things and it's not we have to fix some of these awful game-breaking bugs. We just have to push the game out because we're probably not going to get them done. I don't know. We'll find out when the game releases. And this delay is probably a huge toll on mental health, so I can honestly only hope with all my might that 90% of the bonuses that are being given out of this game aren't going to the failure executives and failure management that have caused the root of this problem with the huge delay earlier this year. It really haunts me to think that when this game is successful, businesses are going to look and see how crunch worked so well for this company and that they could adopt it too, or that they could keep using it because it works. And it's honestly really awful. It is awful for everyone. It is awful for the consumer. You have to wait 21 more days to get your product. It is awful for the employees. You have to be working insane hours all the time. Your mental health is going to be tanking. And you're all doing this to line the pockets of some rich executives, most likely. Which is honestly a topic for a whole nother video that I'm not going to get in now. It's honestly just painful. Crunch is painful, it's awful, and this whole scenario is sad for everyone involved. Thank you guys for watching. This was kind of a roller coaster of a video. This was made the script was made in like, I don't know, an hour. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. I want to hear what your thoughts on this delay is and what you think maybe is happening from all this. You can catch me live at my Twitch, link in the description below. I stream on Friday nights and Sunday afternoons, but that's not the point of this. I hope you guys have a good night.